Hi NARC troopers, this is January 2022. I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. I was doing some packing today and I came across this really beautiful stone. Isn't that lovely? My ex-person within PD, my ex-husband, and I used to go to the crystal shops all around Austin, and we were always looking to get crystals, and it was a really kind of a cool thing that we did together. And anyway, I found this and I like it. I like it a lot. So what do I want to talk to you about today? So I went by and looked at my condo today. That is my plan B, because I'm getting ready to move in about 3 months. And I think that, I've applied for a bunch of jobs, and I know this is crazy to tell you, but in California, because I always said I was going to go there, and it's kind of on my bucket list, and I'm kind of feeling like if I never go, and my narcissist is the only one that ever makes it there, because that's where he went over 2 years ago, that I would, on my deathbed, I would regret that he took that from me, and that he realized my dream and I never got to. So I kind of feel like I have to go, and if it doesn't work out, I'll come back to Austin and move in my little condo and live happily ever after till the end, because it's a comfortable space. I like it. It's cute. It's a little under 1,000 square feet, but it's got 2 bedrooms and it's got a great space and it's got a view of downtown. Yeah, can't not love that, right? I guess there's worse places to be than Austin. But I feel like the California thing is something I have to do. Anyway, while I was in my garage cleaning out things to get ready to move today, because I've got my plan A, California, plan B, move into my condo with my friend. I have a friend who's going to come live with me, and so that'll make things even nicer, right? And so she and I went over there today and took pictures and took measurements, and I told her, I said, it's possible I may be leaving if they like me, and if the money situation works out. She's like, yeah, I'll take care of it. So I'm like, okay, all right, I can do it. I can do this, because I think it'd be really fun living with her, and I like her a lot, and I think we'd make a great team, and that would be cool. But the California thing, it's like, I really feel like it's something I have to do. I could never live there and retire there, unless I met some rich guy or something, because I just wouldn't have enough to live there if I weren't working, and I can't work forever, right? So when I do retire, it will have to be away from there, unless I partner with someone, which, come on, let's face it, guys. I haven't been able to do anything like that yet, and maybe I'm not going to be able to do anything like that. I don't know. These are tough times. So let's talk about what is the subject. I heard this talk by Sam Vaknin where he talks about how there's something called prolonged grief syndrome. He said if you have been in a relationship with a narcissist and then you get discarded, which always happens if you don't leave first, which a lot of people can't muster enough to do that, and so they stick around and get discarded at some point, out of the blue with no warning, usually. He said that about a year is normal to do the Kubler-Ross, I think it was Sarah Kubler-Ross, back in 1969, wrote a book called On Death and Dying, and it was about the stages of grief, how we grieve for our own lives as we prepare to die, if we have a terminal illness or something, and how those left behind grieve the loss of someone in their life. And so she did groundbreaking work there and was the first to name, those 5 stages of grief. And he said, of course, you're going to process all those stages and go through that, but if they last longer than a year or so, that it becomes something else. And that there's something called prolonged grief syndrome. And in the new DSM chart that's going to be coming out this year, 2022, I believe, I think it's the 5th edition, prolonged grief syndrome is not in there yet, but it is, it's going to be there, it's going in there. It's going to be listed as a disorder, as a syndrome, as a condition that you can code it in. The DSM is primarily for categorization purposes, and they use the different diagnoses in there to code in for insurance purposes and billing and healthcare and all that kind of stuff to say, yep, this is a legitimate diagnosis. This is what this person has. This is the code that it gets, and this is the treatment that it gets because of that diagnosis. That's pretty much why that exists, right? The book of the Diagnostic Manual of Different Mental Health Disorders exists for that reason. So they're adding this one in there because, as we go along, psychiatry, mental health, all of that evolves. The study on narcissism, Sam Vaknin was a pioneer in that field. And he's the one who got all that started probably 25, 30 years ago. In the 1990s, he was one of the first ones to start writing about it and coining certain terms like no contact and things like that, that he can be credited for trying to come up with words to describe things that no words existed prior to 1990s when he did that. Well, Kubler-Ross has also been sort of the pioneer for studies on grief. And so they don't know why some people are prone to have prolonged grief disorder, why it sticks with them so long. It could be genetic, it could be environmental, it could be because of their own childhood programming and scripting that they received as children. It could be a lot of different causes that makes a person predisposed to having prolonged grief disorder. So I just want to say the most interesting part about all of that I have learned recently is that, and you're thinking like we're so tired, we're done talking about narcissism and narcissists. We're ready to start talking about recovery. We're ready to start. We get it. We know what a narcissist is. We know the different types. We know how they were made and how we can't fix them, how they're not capable of change and how their brains are affected and just all that. We get it. So what do we do? But this is a little focus on them for a minute because a lot of us, here's why, a lot of us harbor resentment and anger that our lives were ruined by these people who are disordered and came into our lives and lied to us, promised things that they couldn't deliver, and made us feel things that we just, bought into hook, line, and sinker because they were so unique and intense and Technicolor dream coded, like everything was larger than life. And that's how it is when you're in a relationship with a person with NPD. But it's not real, as we have talked about. It is a false front, facade, persona that they present to the world around them. And it's not real. And so I think that it's super important that we acknowledge that it's not real. And So when you're coming out of that, it's really, it's very textbook. What happens next? Just like the narcissistic traits, like you can study those and see that every narcissist has the exact same symptoms, just kind of like every schizophrenic or every person with, some kind of borderline personality disorder or whatever. They have the same manifestations of that disorder. It's like the hallmark flags or markers for that particular disease of the mind and spirit and soul and all of that. So what I want to tell you today is something that I did not know until recently, and that is that I have known, and I think we all know, that narcissists are victims of childhood trauma and abuse, and that it is a trauma response. To become narcissistic is a response to trauma to save them from something that is too much for them as a child to deal with. But I never thought about grief and prolonged grief disorder being something that they experience at an early age, that they can't shake it. The trauma in their lives is so profound, so pervasive, that the grief that they experience stays with them. My person with NPD suffered horrific abuse at the hands of multiple caregivers, where he was passed around from infancy on to different friends and neighbors and family members who, many of them were, did horrible things to him, unspeakable, shameful, perverse, unspeakable things to him. And so he had experienced all that in those very important developmental years. And then his father died when he was still just a little boy. I want to say third grade, maybe. And those things caused such grief that stayed with him, and that he did not have the mechanisms in place, coping skills or whatever, to deal with it. He had no support. People were not there to comfort him and to be there in an appropriate and healthy way for him. He was left alone in this world to face the horrors of extremely profound abuse and then his father's death. So the grief was there in such a deep way that he could not deal with, and he could not escape it. And the prolonged grief disorder leads to things like depression, suicidal ideation, reckless, impulsive behavior that can be life-threatening, antisocial behavior, and it can lead to like PTSD, CPTSD, and all the symptoms that come with that. And so a lot of times that translates to things that look like juvenile delinquency, things that look like substance abuse at an early age, things that look like escapism in the forms of pornography at an extremely early age, still in elementary school, and seeing porn and getting addicted to it because of the chemicals that are released that you don't even understand in your brain, and how that can shape the neural pathways in your brain by watching all that porn when you're a child and being, cutting your teeth on it, growing up with it on a regular basis. Everyone around you's watching it, you're watching it, experiencing that. And there's no comfort, there's no anchor, there's no solace, no place of peace or love, at least not unconditional love. One of my saddest memories of my person with NPD is how he would want to please me and perform for me in a similar way that he did growing up for his mom. He would clean the house, sweep and mop and do all this while I was still asleep on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. And then want my praise and my approval and my validation for doing that. And I always just thought that was so weird. Like, let's do it. Let's clean house together. Or, you go mow the yard and I'll clean the house by myself. But why are you doing all of that? Am I not doing it well enough? Is it my fault? Am I lousy at cleaning house? And he took such pride in his ability to make a bed correctly and clean house correctly. And he would always say, my mom taught me how to do it right. This is the same mom that had beaten him, pulled a gun on him once, had a parade of different boyfriends, like a revolving door coming in and out, and many of them physically abusive. Other things that are too horrible to mention, types of abuse that happened to him at the hands of these people who were sometimes criminal. None of them really decent people. He would clean house like that. And then other times he would sit beside me on the couch and grab my foot and just start, squeezing it and doing this kind of thing that felt really good. But I always thought there was something kind of creepy about that. Like, because he would say, I used to do this for my mom when she would come home from work. So, it didn't help. It didn't help. This whole parentification is what that's called, that I was older in the marriage. I was a chunk older than him. It wouldn't have mattered. Even if I was younger, that still would have happened, because narcissists parentify any partner that is their significant partner. And now that his partner's younger than him, I guarantee you, he's still cleaning house and rubbing her feet, and he's still expecting that same nod of approval. Breaks my heart to think about how damaged, how much he was harmed, and now what that looks like in his adult life. So prolonged grief disorder is my topic today. How it affects us, the victims, and it affects them, the perpetrator, the predator, the one who's had to adapt and to shape shift and to get that false persona to survive. And how they have such a deep grief that the only way, yes, they escape it through, doing criminal things or substance abuse or whatever. But the number one way that they escape it is by developing a false self, a persona that's bulletproof, that's impervious, that cannot be hurt, that cannot be made to feel shame or sadness or despair or loneliness or fear. Their false self doesn't experience any of those things. And I believe that they are incapable of experiencing fear. I've seen it in my husband. He was never afraid when he should have been, when a normal person would have been. He wasn't. He did his reactions. It was a flat effect, is what it's called. It was like nothing happened that happens with normal people, like near-death experiences with car accidents or, poisonous snakes or whatever. There would be a startle response or some kind of recognition of danger. No, nothing. And the other things that I thought he was feeling was just mirroring. So prolonged grief disorder is for real. I would like for you to read more about it, explore that a little bit in the context of what's going on with you, and to know that it happened to them and that their narcissism is an adaptation, survival thing that came in response to that. And that, I think Sam Vaknin is a genius. He knows things. I recommend that y'all listen to him. I listen to him almost every day. He has so many videos on YouTube, so many. And I learn something new every time I listen to him. So when I started out, I had a very foundational knowledge 2.5 years ago about psychology and stuff. When I got my master's degree, my dual major was guidance and counseling, not to do therapy, but for high school and college, and to be like an educational counselor, and talk about weird things and make schedules, and it's not even like a real therapist or anything, but I had that and a very primitive foundational understanding of narcissism. And over the past 2.5 years, it has consumed my life to try to learn about it and to understand it in ways that I didn't before. And I felt very foolish there for a while that I had been so dismissive. I had minimized it. I had my psychiatrist. She wasn't just like a person with a master's degree like me. She was like a legit, went to med school psychiatrist. She called it. She said, he has narcissistic personality disorder. He may have some other things, but he has that for sure. You need an exit strategy because there's no way this is going to have a happy ending. And I remember thinking, you're out of your mind, lady. You don't know what you're talking about, Miss Doctor person. I love him unconditionally, even though I know that there's some things wrong with him. I know that. And it doesn't matter. I'm going to stand by him no matter what. And he needs me. And I need him. And it's a mutually beneficial thing. Well, if you're in that place saying that, please stop and back it up and consider the possibility that you're dead wrong and that you don't understand what narcissistic personality disorder is and what they're incapable of doing and how it's going to end every single time. Every single time. Because that is how it's going to end every single time. Badly, and for a billion reasons that you'll learn about when you study it. But I was arrogant and blinded by the fantasy bubble I was in with him. And I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe her. So I didn't. And she told me that, maybe 2 or 3 years before he actually discarded me. And about 3 years before. And so that whole time, I knew it, but I didn't accept it. So don't make the same mistake I did. It made things a billion times worse, not just for me, but for my family too, for everyone that was in the fallout region after he dropped that atomic weapon and annihilated me. There were other people that were hurt too. It wasn't just me. And maybe all of that could have been avoided if I had just listened and tried to understand and say, you're probably right. If that's what his diagnosis is, and there is no chance for happily ever after, I do need an exit strategy. And I do need to move forward to extricate myself and get out of this. It's tragic that he had prolonged grief syndrome when he was between 2 and 4, and that he continued to have something like that when his father died when he was 8, and that made him what he is. It remapped his brain. It killed him. It killed him. So that he's just this sad human with a body who's really smart and really, has all these gifts that he uses, not for good, but to get what he needs from people. He's very adaptable, and he's done what he's had to do to survive. See, what they don't know is that they find safe places with people who love them unconditionally, but they can't receive that love because they don't know what it is. They don't have healthy attachment styles. They don't have object constancy. They don't know what intimacy or love feels like. They don't know what it is. So it won't be enough to save them. And after 2.5 years, I think I must have some some version of prolonged grief syndrome, because I still have PTSD. I still don't sleep. I maybe get 5 hours of sleep a night, and I worry that that's going to make me susceptible to get COVID and have a bad outcome. But what can you do? It's, anyway. Thank you for being with me on this journey. And thank you very much for being on this journey. And we're going to get through it because, I think that by thinking about all these things that we talk about on here and knowing these things, it really helps us to recover, helps us to claim our humanity in ways that the people within PD can never do, because they're gone. They died a long time ago, and it's tragic. And if you love them, it's just horrible. But you can't change it. And you can't change what all that did to them. And the fact that their core humanity, the parts of them like empathy and compassion, love, intimacy, all of that, those things, they can't feel it. They can't give it because they don't know what that is. It's sad, but the longer you stay, I think it kills you a little bit every day too. You don't know it, but I'm pretty sure it does. So if you don't want to end up the walking dead like they are, get out. Save yourself. Run. Even if it breaks your heart into a million pieces while you're doing it, you're going to have to do it sooner or later. It's not going to be a choice. Do it sooner instead of later, because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to recover. Trust me on that one. Okay, guys, that's it for January 2022. I think this is the, I don't know what day it is, mid-January. So hang in there, guys, and much love to you. And keep trooping, keep soldiering on. Bye-bye.